and then we'll share that so that people can watch YouTube and validate that we're not just lizard people.
Yeah. Are we recorded or not?
Well, it goes to YouTube, and then the video will be on YouTube. I have not gone through and like deleted any old videos or anything like that. Yeah, like the Zoom isn't recorded. We're just, you know, on the stream here.
Yeah, I'm only here for like half an hour and I got nothing to say beyond just wanting to interact with humans at some level.
Yeah, it's legit. It's interacting with humans is great. Except when it isn't. When they do too many human-y things.
Greetings, fellow lizard people.
Hello, lizard person. I thought we were turtle people.
Like
Reptile people.
Are good, you know?
I feel like people catching this on YouTube like a month from now would be just completely.
Oh.
Yeah,
there would be some context clearly missing.
I should go back and look at the channel and see if they're like I kind of like I put the YouTube up in a window and I can see that there's one person watching now. Hello, person watching now. But I kind of keep a mental map of that in my head. It's usually not more than like 4 or 5. So if I go back and see on the channel analytics and say, oh, like 30 people have watched this video and spent more than 10 minutes watching, it's like, wow, that could be amazing. I don't know how many would do so.
Ooh, the spent more than N minutes watching would have been cool to see on like videos where I'm going to talk or anything.
Yeah, let's see if we go to. I still have cookbook triage meetings from when I was doing that at Chef like 8 years ago are still in there. Let's see. How do I have to switch account. HangOps Jones.
I hope you killed that one from when the spammers showed up.
Oh yeah, that yes.
That had to go.
that was a terrible situation. Nobody should be involved in any of that.
Yeah.
I killed the Zoom. I said, okay, we're done. Quit, and then I turned off the YouTube and deleted the video. Just I hope so. I believe so. We have 11 of these. My goodness.
Actually adds up. That sounds about right.
Yeah. I forget how to get into the analytics for a channel. Here we go. You have to go customize the channel. Then you can go to the channel analytics. It's very intuitive. 86 views and 10 hours of watch time. Average view duration is between 6 and up to 39 minutes.
I wonder for the short ones, how many are folks like me that like jumped on YouTube first just to see like, do I want to get involved in this, man?
Oh yeah, like that is an interesting thing that I'm not going to track.
Yeah, that's a metric that won't be easy to discover.
That's a KPI that's not going in my annual performance review.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like all the different streaming things, as far as like community stuff, like this sort of deal, all the different ways that you participate in those is different, and the behavior that you have with them matters differently to the algorithms behind them, right? Like YouTube and Twitch being the big two. Where YouTube, you want people to like, subscribe, ring the bell, make comments, watch other videos from your channel. Whereas with Twitch, you want people to be active in the chat and to be, watching the thing.
And subscribing so that you get some money.
Which is bit tipping. Yeah. No, it very different behaviors.
Yeah.
In the two communities.
Yeah. And being a gamer, I see a lot of stuff on Twitch and recordings on YouTube because, I mean, like I like to play the games, right? But sometimes I'm doing stuff with Magic, and like I don't play Magic Arena very often because I'd rather go to a store and play with my friends than than play an unknown person who I can't interact with in any meaningful way. But I end up watching quite a bit of YouTube content that is people playing Magic over webcam and talking about that sort of thing, and lots of other gaming streams have entered into the picture, like other games, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time just posting emojis into the Twitch chat. I mean, I feel like we could say, look, can we get a turtle in the chat? And like that would happen.
It becomes sort of a clap along thing, you
Yeah.
know. Or
Yeah.
they tried to automate it with the chant function, but people honestly just prefer doing it themselves, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, there, see, got a turtle in.
And there's a turtle.
Ah,
Nice.
I bow to your superior Zoom foo.
So reactions button at the bottom, and then you click the three little dots, because otherwise you're stuck with like clapping hands or
Oh wow.
or
Huh. Yeah.
oh,
yeah, see, whole new level of Zoom
Smart.
engagement, I guess.
There
we don't
is
get all
no
the-
lizard.
there should be a gecko.
Ah, and they don't have an alias? No, there's no gecko.
it's a pity you can't add. I mean, since I can add backgrounds, it's a shame that I can't add emojis.
It's true. Oh, I got a crocodile.
Close enough. There you go.
It's a large lizard with a beak. Oh golly. I thought there was a lizard one or a gecko one. Yeah. There's a magic card that's a gecko, and I'm in a Discord where there is that emoji for gecko. So maybe that's where I saw it. Who knows? Hello, I was born in the 70s and I lived on the internet since the 90s. So
And you still qualify as extremely online. Congrats. Hey, Jeremy.
hey, Jeremy.
Hey, Jeremy.
Howdy, y'all. How goes Sarah? It's been a while,
Literally
At least-
years.
at least face to face.
Yeah. Yeah. Nope. Mostly online.
Yeah.
Still same hair colors. Oh, well.
We're old and boring now.
Some things never change.
It's true.
It's funny to me that you describe purple and green hair as boring.
Right. We've settled into these hair colors and
Yeah.
we're not changing and we're old and fussy.
Exactly.
My hair is trying to settle into a nice gray.
Yeah,
Mine's
that's
trying it.
There's a fix for that, you know.
Purple hair.
I mean, I'm not dictating color.
I mean, I like purple. It's
Have
pretty cool.
options. Okay, great.
Also green, but I don't know that. I think I'd be a little too leprechaunish if I went with green.
Just carry around a pot of gold, you'll be fine.
I mean, the season is coming up.
It's true. Yeah,
It would be a
it's
perfect.
in a month.
Yeah.
Wow, we're almost halfway through February already.
All you need is
Let's
a
see.
pot of gold and a bottle of whiskey and some green hair, and you'll be set.
Every
Yeah,
year I
I'd go
deal
out.
with the, oh, did you do that for St. Patrick's Day? And then right after it's the, oh, did you do that for St. Patrick's Day? Every year, the pitch, literally you can watch it shift.
Like, oh, you really should have undone that now that it's not St. Patrick's Day.
I am literally 22 years into this hair color, I promise.
I
It's
would
not
just
going
tell them you
anywhere.
did it for Thanksgiving and
Then stare
leave it at
blankly.
that. I think, yeah.
it's-
Arbor Day.
I mean, why should I? It's natural. So
what do you mean? Do I dye my hair?
dyed my hair.
There you go.
Wait, you dye your hair? That's weird.
Yeah.
I just spent a lot of time in chlorinated pools. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, my hair was too dark when I was doing a lot of swimming for it to really pick up any green from that. But even when I get in a pool, I grew up in Florida, so I spent a lot of time in the summer in the pool. And like even when the chlorine was like to the point where you didn't want to open your eyes underwater, nothing. It didn't make a dent on my hair.
Part of Florida.
Miami.
Okay.
Then I spent 10 years in Orlando before moving out to the Bay. And I don't really recommend Orlando. You have all the aggravation of Florida and you're not close to a beach.
Yeah, I've got a few generations going back in the Tampa area, so spent a chunk of my life there too.
And you have the joy of tourists for the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, that makes it worse. At least in Tampa, we didn't have too much of that.
Yeah, like you drive near the parks and you'll see people crossing like 6 lanes of traffic with no turn signal because by God, they've spent 5 hours coming down from wherever, and they're not missing that exit, even though they could turn around at the next one.
Why should they? They paid. Yep. No.
So you were well prepared for the Bay then.
I'm actually really fortunate in that in 10 years in the Bay, my longest commute was 30 minutes. Which is
3.
You've done well.
3 minutes? 3 or 3-0?
3-0. Although
3-0. Okay, yeah.
Although for several of those jobs, it was a 15-minute walk.
Yeah, I was going to say it's hard to have a 30-minute commute here that's reliably 30 minutes and not like, well, it's usually 30, but then sometimes it's 90 or.
Well, I lived in Mountain View, close to Caltrain.
Oh, okay, so yeah.
And I had one Caltrain job in Sunnyvale, one in Redwood City, but it was nice because at the other end, it was a 2-minute walk from the train to the office. So, I mean, as Bay Area commutes go, I was very fortunate. I actually dropped out of an interview at one point because I took the train up to the city, and then it took me like 25 minutes or 35 minutes to walk from 4th and King to the office. By the time I got to the office, I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this every day.
Where was the job? Somewhere around like 8th and Townsend or something?
I'm trying to remember. I want to say that sounds about right, but this was 8+ years ago, so I really don't remember.
Yeah.
I just remember getting to the office and already being irritated. then the interview, they revealed more than they probably should have about their stack. And I'm like, oh, great. So I'm going to get to spend an hour and a half each way and work with shitty technology. That sounds wonderful.
That's asking a lot. Every time I moved to Mountain View, I ended up picking a job up in San Francisco. Every time I moved back up to San Francisco.
Back to Mountain View.
Yep. Every time. If
My
I was
biggest
a motorcycle
win,
commuter, I'd have gone nuts.
Oh man. Yeah. My biggest win ever, I think, was SendGrid when like I was living in Denver and commuting to Boulder, which was okay because it was SendGrid, but it was a horrible commute overall. And
Yeah,
it was downtown Denver. So I was walking to the bus and then, I could walk to the bus, take the bus straight to the office, but still a lot of times I just would drive because I couldn't deal with the bus, like the Rockies traffic on the way back and whatever. But then they were like, all right, we've outgrown our office. We need to open a new office. And the way Boulder companies always do that is Broomfield. And then you have no bus option that's good anymore. And instead they opened a downtown Denver office.
Yeah, it's a nice office too.
It was like, that one's gone, the one that I was going to. But yeah, that was amazing. I was like, wait, did I win the lottery? Like I can walk to work again. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a few meetups at the
The
what was
Larimer Street.
SendGrid? Yeah, what was SendGrid and became Twilio. I think I might have been there once. When did Twilio acquire SendGrid? Because I've only been here in
That was
Denver 5 years. So
well after the IPO. So that was what? Still, that was maybe 6 years ago or something.
all right, so I
No.
think
Not
I don't
that
think it was
long
that
ago, I don't
long.
think.
Maybe less than that.
Yeah, I
I
remember.
bet the internet will tell us.
I remember Sylvia being in New York City for
2019.
that. Yeah, that sounds about right. Because I remember Sylvia coming to New York
Okay,
for
yeah.
the announcement.
Mhm.
That was apparently in 2019. Yeah.
Yeah.
February,
Right, so that
February
seems
1st.
reasonable,
So
yeah.
3 years ago. That wasn't
All
2
right,
years
so-
ago. That was 3 years ago now.
so. I may have been there while it was still SendGrid. Back in the before times
But,
when I
yeah.
went to meetups.
But that was after the office that I'm talking about. That would
Yeah.
have been the office that was in a high rise, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Were meetups still a thing between paid meetups and COVID?
I'm continuing to pay for the existence of one and have not actually arranged an in-person thing just because I feel like it would be irresponsible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a why am I still paying for it? Short attention span thing.
Yeah.
I know
Literally
some
every
of the
subscription
DevOps
model.
days are starting. Yeah, exactly. I know some of the DevOps days are starting to look towards doing hybrid, in person and online. Once again, they're starting to spin up. They're starting to look at booking venues, but
I need to talk to the Denver team then, because
yeah,
I miss a good meetup, and I miss DevOps days a lot. And
The Boulder DevOps meetup has been meeting hybrid for the last few months, but I haven't been able to go because it's on Mondays and doesn't work out for me most of the time.
part for me, I can't remember if it was the DevOps or the Linux one in Boulder that I stopped going to because they stopped announcing what the topics were going to be. And I was like,
Probably
I'm
the
not
Linux
driving
one.
all the way up to Boulder
Yeah.
to find out that, we're talking about, something I'm completely
sales-
uninterested in.
Yeah. It's a sales pitch for this big data product or whatever. They're like, yeah, no, thanks. Whatever. Yeah.
I spoke at the Boulder DevOps meetup several years ago, a couple of different times. And I
Yeah.
always tried to not have any kind of pitch in there other than we're hiring.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is fine. I mean, I don't mind that. And I even don't mind if somebody's like showing off the product, as long as they tell me in advance that that's what they're doing, because I may actually be
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
it may be, like, oh, it's a topic that I'm interested in. And, I've reached a point in life where I'm like happy to pay money for somebody else to provide most of
Yeah.
the software for me.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
to know that, there's actually somebody getting paid to do bug fixes and
Well, and
security
that was-
fixes.
That was a good thing about being at Chef, is because all the products are all open
Mhm.
source and free until they changed like the business model and like did that
Yeah.
whole thing a couple of years ago. But like when I was doing talks, I was like, I'm not selling anything. I'm just telling you like this cool stuff that we have, and
Yeah.
you can go use it. And that was wonderful. I also got to be a corporate shill and
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. But that's always, it's there's sales pitch, and then there's like, here's a product solving a problem that you may have, and
Yeah.
here's me showing you how it solves it.
Yeah, I
Very
did a talk on Chef Vault before HashiCorp released Vault, so that naming was rather unfortunate when they released that product. But that was probably one of the largest crowds of people I've seen at a meetup. It was like, wait, am I at a meetup or a small conference?
For some reason, secrets management is a thing.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've got that solved now, though. So, right.
Right. Now we just
Please.
need to solve dependency management.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Or identity.
That should be easy.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
depth solver library out there.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. There's nothing complicated about this. It's just it's a simple problem. It's one page in your college textbook.
Yeah, it's just recursion.
Yeah. I love all the plethora of, let's just pull in every version of the dependency you might need approach, or the, all right, let's try and dep solve this and come up with the one that matches all of the sub requirements.
I'm acutely interested in languages that will namespace dependencies so that you can just have different versions if different things want different versions.
Yeah, I mean, Node, I guess, is sort of doing that, right? I mean,
I have no knowledge of Node and I don't want to change that.
Yeah.
I think that was one
I
of
took
the biggest downfalls we had with cookbook naming was that the community site wasn't namespaced. So there was only one Apache cookbook, one MySQL cookbook, and it was like namespacing was you make a new cookbook name and then you have a different.
You do the shadow cookbook thing before Burks and
I think that's probably been mostly solved with policy files or people, migrating to Kubernetes and using Docker files. I don't know.
Yeah, Kubernetes solves everything, right?
Having to fork the whole chain with Docker does suck, though.
Or looking at the CNCF landscape of software, and you're like, I don't know which of these things I need to use to run my software in this environment.
That's where the line between vendor and software seems to blur most now, is because it's all on the cloud and it's not like something that comes into your workstation or anything. It's like it's projected right into your Kube infrastructure or whatever. So it's like, all right, but I need like a comparative analysis of what parts of the ecosystem I put together and what way to solve what problem. The fact that you exist in the ecosystem doesn't tell me shit. You do, sir. It's great. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Made KubeCon kind of a bummer for me anyway. Like the what's coming to open source Kube, or here's what we think we should put in Kube. That stuff was interesting. Like, here's how the scheduler could change to solve this use case. But the whole like, and now here's our product demoed on Kube. It's like, thanks.
Yeah, it's like, I don't need to see your product running on it unless it's something where you're actually adding value to Kube.
Yeah.
Not just, oh, our thing is working on this. It's like, okay, that's nice and that's great for you, but it's not something that I want to have to explain to my boss that so I asked you for like $2,500 in conference fee, hotel and travel, and I spent an hour and a half of the 2 days watching somebody install some app that we'll never use.
Yeah. Occasionally there might be value in that, in the sense of like, really, you're running Cassandra on Kubernetes. Show me all about that.
Yeah. But don't just like bootstrap it and tell me that it works, right?
Exactly.
Show me day two ops. The whole point is
like
state.
Like, here's why we think this is actually a good idea and how we made it not be worse than everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. How are you dealing with the fact that to cycle certs with Cassandra, you have to restart the whole fucking thing?
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just that guy from the data center guy from Silicon Valley. And here's where one of your boxes will go. Let's go over here and I'll show you where another one of your boxes will go. Here's our app running on Kubernetes. Here's our app running on Kubernetes. Here's our app running on Kubernetes. Who the fuck cares?
It's the same app in another namespace.
Yeah, there's like 5 different Cassandra operators.
Here's our app in another pod.
I like using namespaces for each application rather than in logical environments, because we didn't need to have multiple logical environments. We just pushed to prod because I listened to Charity Pagers. But also I don't remember if we had a separate Kubernetes cluster that was the non-prod stuff. But this is like
it seems super brave to have non-prod and prod on the same cluster.
Yeah.
I guess brave being one word for it. Yeah.
It's about off, I think.
The British
you can
brave.
absolutely, like, at least with GKE, it's really nice because your Google identity is actually addressable by Kubernetes RBAC. So you can actually make lockdown namespaces like on demand if you were to do something like a Terraform module that said, okay, fine, you want a namespace, but let me give you like a namespace that's actually safe for you to use, right? And that everyone else can't use and that you're not allowed to do unsafe shit in.
Right. Yeah. I was using cops to stand up a actual cluster
Right.
on EC2 instances, because when we set up the cluster, it was right after AWS added the Kubernetes thing, and it was not quite at the point where it was really stable and usable for us, which came pretty quickly. But by the time we got everything deployed and their service was usable, is like, okay, well, now I can migrate to that service, or I can just continue using what I have, because these are legacy apps that are just going to run on these 6 of one, half dozen of 3 more.
I don't know. Maybe I'm too old school and paranoid, but like I just don't want anything on my production machines that's not prod.
Oh yeah.
You know, I
But
just
then, like, how do you test before you deploy?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather have a second
Blast radius.
cluster.
Yeah.
I'd rather have a second cluster, just because what if somebody decides, hey, I'm turning up the size of the staging environment to 500 pods.
Yeah.
And suddenly now the cluster is resource constrained. And oh wait, prod just got a spike.
Yeah.
In requests, and there's no headroom.
Yeah.
You know, and people tell me, oh, there are ways to reserve, and I'm like, it sounds like it would be way easier to just have it in a separate cluster and know
Sure.
that, like, the worst case that happens for me if stage goes sideways is I just destroy it and start over.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm also curious. I haven't seen lots of Kubernetes environments, but I would be curious to know how many are doing clusters as cattle rather than pets. Like, how many times we have, how many environments
They're doing
have
it a
just
little
like,
bit.
oh yeah, we could totally just, spin up a new cluster, get the apps over there in the middle of the day, no problem, and kill the old one if there was something goofy going on, versus, oh God, we need to recover this cluster.
We have enough clusters configured a lot alike that it's kind of like cattle, but they're like cattle that get kind of long in the tooth. And like,
Yeah.
you have to know which cattle you're talking about. Like, as a developer who owns a service that you want to deploy someplace, you have to say what place that is. We don't
I'll
have
be back
like
in 10. I gotta run.
Yeah.
We do want to go
Don't eat that cattle,
clusterless
it's tough
is
now.
how I've been thinking of it. Right. Go from
Send
serverless to
serverless.
clusterless.
Serverless to clusterless.
Yeah.
We're actually trying to get to like GCP projects as cattle, because right now they're all like named directories in a Terraform mono repo. And it's like credential locked down because it's God mode CI running Terraform. So we don't want people like exfiltrating that credential, but it's Circle CI, so they definitely could. And yeah, so it's like a frictionful process to say, I want to just try out my Terraform changes. You have to like log into the CI.
Yeah. Sometimes we put too many guardrails on ourselves.
Well, the guardrails, like, it goes back to the point, like, it's nice to have something completely separate, right? Like, it's nice until you have too many of them, or it's nice until like accessing that other context is actually painful. But yeah, it's easier to get started than actually expressing everything in policy, for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I have the dubious honor of not doing any operation stuff at the moment in my current role.
Should I be happy or sad for you?
I mean, I get to talk to you on the internet. I get to HangOps with the HangOps folks. Seems to be
You're
working.
not just like fixing Jenkins deploy pipelines when you log on to HangOps like I was this morning.
What is Jenkins? Is that still do people still run Jenkins?
I do.
Charmed life, my friend.
I'm of course joking. I know that Jenkins is still out there.
Jenkins is unfortunately, we run a platform, and so we run a bunch of nodes to put our customers' applications on, and the way of updating customer application directories of configs and shit, because it predates Docker, is you run a Jenkins job that does a narrow chef run list for just like that directory of shit.
That sounds actually pretty cool.
It's okay. It's just it's not that narrow when you think about it, because it's still like converge the entire thing and keep the customer's application directory stateful.
Sure. Yeah.
And so like it's an okay way to do Chef. If we were giving it a bill of materials for all of its parameters. Unfortunately, it runs a bunch of scripts that then reach back out to the inventory system that dispatched the job in the first place. So then you have like this smeared configuration that you can't have tested or validated before you got started, which leaves shit in an even more broken state. But yeah, if you have to do Chef in the modern day, it's not the worst way by far.
Right. Yeah. I like I said, I'm not doing much operation stuff in my current role, and I haven't done anything at all with Chef in the last year. So I don't even know what. I think they're releasing version 18.
I think we're still on like 12. We have just Eldritch Chef that we do not update.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That also tracks with common usage patterns.
Yeah.
But at least you got to 12.
Yep.
I was running Hosted Chef, and we had an Elasticsearch graph that would count all of the versions of all the Chef clients that were hitting the hosted. So I could see that there's somebody out there that is still running Chef 09.
Ballsy.
It's probably some machine that's running in their old AWS account that they moved off of. And they forgot to turn off that instance because it's probably running in some region they don't use very often. It's probably not a Bitcoin miner because it predates Bitcoin.
It might be a Bitcoin miner now.
Well, I mean that could be. Yeah, that's some old stuff. 09.
How many, like, what's the question I'm asking? So I'm currently working for a company where our product is open source. And we charge for a hosted version of it. And we were super smart. I made it a GPL. Which gets really complex around, well, we'll have a slightly different version for our hosted stuff that has all of the stuff that makes it easy to host, because we'd have to open source that too. So we have a bunch of machinery around it, but we run bog standard product. But that means that we can't make it easier to mass host it. Because then we'd have to change the product, and we could do that and just be like release it, but also it's like it's only useful for us, so we don't believe in polluting the product with shit that's like not useful for anybody else.
Right, because it's open source.
Right. But also that you can pretty much upgrade from any version with our updater, and it'll just like do the right thing, which is kind of miraculous.
Yeah, that falls into the dependency management stuff is hard.
Yeah. But I mean, assuming that like your external versions of things are correct to run the things that, but I think you can copy like the source directory over and onto a new box with new things and go, hey, pull down the Git version, run this, and it'll do all the migrations and everything and whatnot. Anyway, like what I guess my question is, what would the upgrade path from 0.9 look like? Like, is there one, or is there a point where it's like, no, this was such a breaking change, it was just like you have to, export your shit and re-import it and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what you're doing with Chef. Like what kinds of features of the API and the like the recipe DSL that you're using, whether that's going to be affected. I was chatting with Mandy Walls a few months ago, and she used a blog post that I wrote like back in who knows when. This is the custom reporting, like post-run report stuff. And I had a report handler that was just example code, and she just copied that and pasted it into the thing she was doing, and Like it didn't work because the thing she was doing needed some other stuff on it, but like the reporter code that I wrote like forever ago still worked on the modern version of Chef that she had downloaded that week. Like that stuff still, like those APIs still work. But one of the big things that that Chef did over the years was really improving Food Critic and using Food Critic as a tool to find in your cookbook code where you're using deprecated APIs and that kind of thing. So you can run Food Critic against a cookbook and find out, oh, you know, your cookbook you wrote for 09 is going to break in these spectacular ways. But if you're just using like straight up really simple resources and you're not doing any wacky features, it's probably just going to work. And if the wacky features you're using is you're just dipping into Ruby as a language and like doing data structures or logic or writing your own custom code in there, it's probably just going to work. You can probably just upgrade. A lot of the consternation around the upgrades from like 11 to 12 were because of ways that people were leveraging those internal DSL things that got deprecated. And they went to Chef Conf and somebody gave a talk on this really cool thing that was in Chef 11 that then got deprecated in 12, or they're doing the older way of writing the lightweight resources to write their own custom resources. And then the custom resource stuff in Chef 12 like completely broke their world. But if you started out in the era of like 09 and you kept up with everything along the way, it wasn't terribly difficult to keep up with it. Yeah, there was annoying version things, but like that's every software. So
That's
why we have jobs. This didn't have to deal with like a Docker API change that makes you not able to run a certain type of container under that or whatever, right? Like those are like, you can still use your cookbooks, you just might have to write some code differently. And Food Critic nowadays will tell you that. Also 09 came out, I think, in 2010. So if you're running something that old, I mean, that's the machine that it's running on probably doesn't need to be there anymore. Snapshot that API or that AMI.
No, it'll still be running in 30 years under like multiple levels of virtualization to make sure that that thing still runs.
Well, yeah. I mean, as long as it's an app that runs on Linux and is, makes syscalls, you can package that up and shove it in Kubernetes.
That's fair.
I learned that from Kelsey Hightower.
Oh, I have some embarrassingly old instances, but soon they will die.
Yeah.
Not quite 2010. Not quite.
We had when I was at Chef, we retired the oldest running machine when I moved back to the ops team. It was the system that was running the mailing list software for the community mailing list. We stood that machine up when the company was still HJK Solutions. It was the build master for the entire, like it was a puppet master. It ran Nagios. It ran the mailing, like the Jira and Confluence instances that we use to run the consulting company. And then we turned all that stuff off, other than the mailing list software, for years while we were still running on Simpa. And then when the mailing lists were migrated over to Discourse, we finally shut it down. It had an uptime of something like almost 2,000 days. No, it was more than that. It was way more than that. It had been running from 2008 to, I think they migrated the mailing list in 2017. So I think it was almost 9 years. And the guy in the ops team that shut it down, he recorded a video of him logging into the machine, doing an uptime, and then doing a wall announce something like Goodbye Cruel World or something like that, and then type shut down.
Shut down minus H forever.
And then he saved that. Yes, and then he saved that that video as a GIF and posted it in the ops channel, and we had a Slack bot that would bring that message back.
Awesome.
It was great. Oh, memories. Longest running machine I've ever seen.
I ran into, well, I didn't run into a buddy of mine at another school at the university. Was like, so we were looking in one of these labs and we found this sun box that this was in 2003, it must have been, that's running not even the most current version of SunOS and had not been rebooted in who knows how long, because it was a university. It was some postdocs project that got this machine funded. It was sitting on a shelf. The postdoc left the machine behind, and it just kind of sat there festering. And there were a bunch of grad students using it because they would each pass on the root credentials as they graduated. But silly things like updating it or rebooting it or any of that, none of that happened.
I think the most impressive thing to me about systems with that kind of uptime is like nobody tripped a breaker in that time, no substation went down in that time, no East Coast blackout during that time. Like,
it's still just fascinating to me conceptually, like in my role as like an org SRE, where people are like, hey, we need to take advantage of that like vault kube stuff you guys have been doing. We run our own GKE cluster by pointing and clicking, but we need this part. It's like, okay. It's like, well, why? What happens? And it's like, well, the cert lapses or we forget to reconfigure it and this whole data pipeline goes down. And we go, okay, but then what happens when you restore it? And it's like, oh, all the data is lost. It's like, wait, what? Yeah, we can't change the timestamps. We can't keep the timestamps immutable and flush it through that way. It's all on receipt. There's no handling of late data. It's like, certs are the least of your problems here. Like, I understand that automating will fix this failure mode, but Jesus.
Yikes. I mean, maybe you shouldn't put your disks, put your storage in a RAM disk.
Yeah. Oh yeah, everything's in memcached. That's our backup. It's all in memcache.
No,
if you're across multiple AZs, I would have more faith in that than just like, oh, I don't know, no handling of late data when you have to be able to handle late data. Like,
you only have to if you care about your data.
Yeah. My favorite, I was interviewing quite a bit a year ago and a half year ago for various reasons, and one of my favorite tell me about a time when questions was, tell me about a time when you caused a production outage. And my favorite one is, I restarted memcached because I was logged into the wrong EC2 instances for a customer with a very large application that was all in memcached.
Yeah,
it was spectacular.
Yeah, it's like the joke that like with distributed systems, all problems can be solved in one of two ways. The first is adding a cache layer, and the second way is removing a cache layer.
Correct. Yes. It depends on how much you subscribe to the idea that cache invalidation is the second hardest problem in computers.
Yeah, I have a T-shirt about the problems with distributed message queues that starts with like number 2. The problem is in order deliver. It starts with like number 1, in order delivery. Number 2, number 1 is no duplicates. Number 2 is in order. Number 2 is in order delivery. Number 1 is no duplicates. Number 2 is in order delivery.
And guaranteed delivery at least once.
Yeah. But yeah.
Idempotency is still a good idea.
Yeah. that was like the one thing. I mean, I loved that in Chef, I could drop in and just write some Ruby, but I hated that my coworkers could just drop in and write some Ruby.
Literally anywhere.
You know, because there were many places
where,
yeah, there were many places where it was like super handy, you know, like processing a list of file names or whatever, and just like replicate them in a loop rather than actually duplicating them. But it's like so easy to break the idempotency, and it's like, oh. And then there's always the person who like doesn't get why it's a big deal.
Yep.
And you're like, I need to be able to run this twice and not break shit. Oh, you can just set it to only run on boot. I'm like, I could, but I won't. You know, especially when it's something where you have a bunch of data on the node, so you do actually care. Like, if it's stateless, fine, just make it in a mutable image and just roll in the autoscaler and replace everything. But if it's something that's got, you're like, oh look, it's Elasticsearch data nodes.
Right.
Turns out I can't just roll a new one. Well, I mean, I can if I want to watch, oh look, a quarter petabyte of data needs to transition to the new instances.
Yeah. Also modulo like how intelligent your networking stack is and like how you're able to discover new nodes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I had a discussion a couple jobs ago, and I'm like, you want to just roll new nodes? How much data do you have? And they started saying, well, it's only 1/10 of a petabyte. I said, when you're measuring in fractions of a petabyte, rolling new nodes is a problem.
Yep.
It's like it's okay. It'll only take 150 hours for it to balance to migrate all the data to the new nodes. No problem.
Are you fine with being in fail forward mode for 149 hours?
Well, they're not getting the page.
Yep.
Oh, it's kind of it. Oh, well, I'm no longer there. I don't have to care. I get to not care. And actually, I was lucky because my director was like, oh no, we're not taking pages for this. And it's like, great. The attack dog is on my side, and he has been unleashed. He was a really good manager.
We are starting to transition from an on-call model that was from back when we had just one infrastructure team and Sensu, and over to like Prometheus, Alert Manager, PagerDuty, and everything going to the team that actually owns it. So we've got all the technology. Now it's just a matter of like actually sort of putting our foot down and saying like, no more Sensu checks. I don't care if it looks a lot like one that's already there. Or you can do that as long as you actually set up your team in PagerDuty so that the service label actually routes to them. Because it's gotten to the point where like the on-call rotation can't possibly understand what everyone's doing.
Yeah. In the past, I've been that guy who always complains about when somebody wants to add new alerts, because I'm like, I'm not letting you add a new alert that's coming to us until we have a run book.
Yep.
Because it's like the number. Several jobs ago, we finally counted up all the services that the DevOps team, although it was really just an ops team, was getting paged on, and we were joking that, we can't even name them by letter anymore because we have more than 26 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, yeah, I can't, even if I wanted to, can't keep up with the changes in your service. You have to give me a run book, and then my director was like, well, there's no point in the alert coming to you and then you turning around and tracking down an engineer on the team. Now, is there? I'm like, well, you're preaching to the choir.
Yep.
Human middleware is the worst kind of on-call.
Yeah,
it is. And it turns out that like that still isn't a solved problem anywhere, despite years of community events and talks and people doing like bringing awareness to people and building apps and like all these sorts of things, because the people who like there's so many people that are out there just doing their work. They don't have time to go to conferences and they're not engaged.
Yep.
Right. Like the number of people in HangOps is extraordinary. There's thousands in the HangOps channel, and then there's over 12,000 people in the Slack itself. So there's thousands of people who have joined actually small community, so tiny subset of the entire industry. And like the engagement level is so minuscule. And that's why it takes so long for things like the Phoenix project and the DevOps movement and all that
because
sort
it's
of
been
thing.
12 years, 15 years since the
12.
word DevOps was coined.
Yeah, it was at Velocity 2010 when John Allspaw gave the talk about Flickr and their dev and their ops, and he had the joined heart Venn diagram thing. And then Patrick Dubois said later that year, I think at some I don't remember which conference it was at, but he coined the phrase DevOps, and like that, it just rolled from there.
Yeah, and still people don't know. And I know people who have spent their whole careers working at a single bank.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hear about what goes on in the bank, on the one hand, I'm kind of glad that they do the amount of testing they do before they do a rollout, because people's money is at stake.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of ridiculous that they were bragging about going to 3 deploys a year.
To
Like
4.
No, going from 2 to 3.
Oh yeah, 2 to 3, yeah, or 3 to 4 or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody recently who worked at a bank that handled credit card transactions, and their smoke test for determining that the upgrade went successfully or the migration went successfully was to go to a gas station that had that card reader and do a transaction and be on the phone with somebody and call them and say, okay, did the transaction I just did show up in the database? You get the receipt and they get the little transaction ID on there. Did that show up? That was the smoke test to validate it.
I would, that's, oh my God.
Right?
I mean, that's
like,
terrible in so many ways. Like, what happens if that gas station is offline?
It's also like, don't you just have the telemetry? Like, why does it have to be this card? Don't you have any other label?
Well, I mean, we do know what those banking systems are running on, right?
Yeah.
They're running on mainframes that haven't been touched in 30 years, that are running COBOL, that was last updated for Y2K. Like,
and let's be fair, it's fucking amazing that you can run a 30-year-old or 40-year-old binary on a brand new, I don't even know what, I think IBM's now calling them Z systems or whatever
they are.
It's essentially the 360 family, whatever the current generation is of the.
Yeah, like extreme backwards compatibility is a huge deal for all that, because I mean, it's not like all these startups that we work in is like, oh yeah, the application code we wrote like last month, we tossed all that out. We wrote the whole thing in cool new whiz-bang language that came out last week.
And even then, like, I would at least like API compatibility. Like, I know there's one team really that at our organization that controls both the client and the server, and they just don't update the client because it's too hard, because they would have to update it across the whole fleet, and it's written in C, and people don't really know C, and it's not part of the build pipeline, except that it kind of is, because my last PR before I left the team was to make it part of the build pipeline so that you really could deploy the C client in a Docker container. It's a fuse daemon, and like do some basic integration tests, like actually mount the file system, actually try to do some files shit, make sure that it's stateful, clear the cache, make sure it's still there. And they just don't roll out the client. And it's like, you could actually just simultaneously roll them both if you just had backwards compatibility guarantees. If you actually tested backwards compat, you would have no problem here. You would just roll them out at the same time.
Yeah. So about those tests you talk of.
Yeah. They have not been updated since I left the team.
Yeah, it's like,
But yeah, I think like you guys were saying about culture and us being very much in the minority. It's like I think it's the phenomenon I'm witnessing at my current org, I think, is something like the board is really sick of not seeing a return on their investment. So they're trying to hire like their idea of an adult. And their idea of an adult has like horribly ass backward outmoded ideas of how to do this shit. So they're like, God, guys, go slow. Get a staging environment so we can hire QA from India so that they can like make sure the file system still works. And meanwhile, like it's a content addressable file system with no garbage collection. So there's a lot of data in GCS that we're paying for. It's like, well, you said to go slow.
all right, I gotta go. I'm seeing activity on Slack that I need to go investigate.
Indeed, it is time. Thank you all for joining.